So now we're going to move down below the brick we've already worked on. We're going to work on this bigger one. We have the core shadow that we're going to start in first. So we're just going to use scribbling, and we're going to scribble this in pretty dark. I'm just starting by defining the line of core shadow. Since this is going to almost be black, this line's going to basically disappear. So I'm just going to look at my photo reference and work out this line. And then I go in and I'm just going to start scribbling in a dark value. So since I know this is going to basically be solid black, I can go in and cross hatch over this. And so the reason I scribble first is if I were to just cross hatch this, there would be a distinct just cross hatch that you'd see. Since I scribble underneath, the cross hatching over still allows you to see that scribble, which gives it that rock texture I'm looking for. And once my hatching is done, I can go ahead and cross hatch this. Now, normally staying inside the lines is what you want to do. It's okay if lines kind of go over the edge because this is a stone wall and the edges aren't smooth. So now I'm going to go in the areas of midtone here, and I'm just going to do lighter scribbling to give me the texture and the value. So I'm not going to do as tight a scribbles as I did in my core shadow area. I still want a lot of white to show through in these areas. I am only doing scribbling right now. I'm going to save the stippling until I get to the end of my mid-tone section and I start working with some of the lighter areas. And I'm just going through, I'm looking up at my photo reference always, and I'm just defining the really dark portions as kind of a guide to where I'm going. Now that I've kind of scribbled in a lot of the midtones, now I'm going to start doing just some small areas of stippling to build up that midtone value. And I'm kind of mixing in scribbling and stippling at the same time. Now I'm going to go around, just add a little more value, and I'm going to start to define the edge of the top side of the brick. There's a pretty large crack, so I'm just going to go around and define that so I know where my texture is going to be. Once I move on to the lighter areas, I want to keep the scribbling as light as I can. I don't want to build up the value too much because this is the highlight side of this stone. And if I want, I can look up just above where I've already drawn a highlight of a stone, and I can just make it as similar to that as possible. And there's some larger holes in the stone. I'm just going around and I'm defining those. And again, that's just kind of a guide for when I'm working these areas where I need to put in more scribbling and more stippling. So as I look at the highlight side, I realize I need a little more value built up in the texture side of this stone. So I'm just going to do some hatching, not a ton, just enough to darken up that value. And I'm just working back over previous areas, building that up to just get the mid-tone to where I like it next to those highlight sides. I'm just doing some hatching in some of the areas that need to be a little bit darker. I'm not doing a ton of cross hatching, I'm just doing really tight hatch lines. Remember, when you're doing stippling and scribbling on the highlight sides on this stone, it's the left side and the top, just make sure you're not doing too much too quick, because we can't go backwards and get rid of this. So very little pressure, and then slowly build it up. I'm going in, I'm just touching up some of the finer details, spots that I think need to be a little bit darker, just putting a tiny bit more texture in these areas. I'm just doing some light hatching over a couple areas in the highlight side that just need to be a little bit darker. And that's the end of this video. We'll be moving on to the other stones in our next video.